Growing up, I've always had an eye for the paranormal. Even when I was too young to remember things, my mom always told me that I would point out people that I saw, but they couldn't see. The most active house I've been in is the house I currently live in, and the activity is actually starting to pick up recently. For background, we've lived in this house for 10 years, and I've seen a lady and a young boy since we first moved in. They're both dressed as if they are from the early 1900s. I've had nothing but good encounters with the boy, but I wish I could say the same about the woman. I've seen the boy run from room to room, but there was one other time someone else has seen him as well. About 5 years ago, I was on a FaceTime with my ex-girlfriend when I accidentally dropped my phone underneath my bed. When the phone hit the floor, I heard my ex say, "Hey, Jason," and I said, "What do you mean, hey, Jason?" And she goes, "Isn't that Jason underneath your bed?" Jason was my brother, but I was home alone at that time. He was harmless and always has been, but it was just a good spook. I don't know how to describe the phenomenon, and I know that I'm about to see something because I'll start to see this slime substance kind of fall from the top of the doorway. The slime obviously isn't there, but it's as if the doorway is kind of lagging out and then a vision will soon follow. The first time I saw the lady, my family and I were taking pictures outside of the front of the house. As we were outside, I saw the lady in white looking out at us from within the house. I mainly see her in that one room, which is strange because sometimes I will walk in on my dogs playing with something that isn't there. My dog will react as if someone was petting or chasing her, but there's nothing there. Anyways, in the last month, I've had 3 different experiences with the lady, and it's all been around 2 or 3 a.m. I'll be sleeping, and a woman's voice saying my name will wake me up, and then something will happen. The first time I was awoken from her, I was sleeping when I heard a woman say my name softly, James. When I woke up, I looked around. My back was facing the closet at the time. All of a sudden, from behind me, I hear a loud scraping sound and then a huge bang. I'm a Star Wars fan and I have a Boba Fett helmet on my desk which somehow toppled over onto the floor. I was scared shitless. There was no way the helmet could move unless someone forcefully pushed it. The second time I was awoken from her, it was around the same time, 2 or 3 a.m., when she said my name once again. On both occasions, I thought it was my mother saying my name. So I woke up the second time to look around, and I didn't see anything. So when I closed my eyes, I heard my name again, and all the power in my room went out. At first, I thought the entire house lost power, but it was only my room. The microwaves and stove clocks will reset in the kitchen if they lose power, but when I checked, the clocks were still set. Next, I checked in on my brother because he has a fan that will stay off if it loses power from a surge. When I walked into his room, the fan was still on, so my room was in fact the only room that lost power. I was out of power for like 30 seconds, but it was still scary because I couldn't turn on my lights. The most recent encounter I've had with her happened a few nights ago. I've been trying to convince myself it's sleep paralysis, but it's too coincidental. I was sleeping when all of a sudden I felt something grab onto my neck with 2 hands and begun choking me. As it's choking me, it was laughing sinisterly. It was a female's laugh, so I knew it had to be her. At first, I didn't want to open my eyes because I didn't want to see, so I just started swinging my arms trying to punch it. When it wouldn't stop, I eventually opened my eyes and whatever it was gone. If it was sleep paralysis, that was my first time ever having it, but it just felt way too real. And usually you can't move or speak when it's sleep paralysis. When I looked around after that, my dog looked at me like, "What the fuck just happened to you, lol?" Anyways, hopefully it starts to die down, because I haven't been able to get much sleep recently because of it. Hello everyone. This happened to me almost 4 years ago. I wasn't in a good moment of my life, but I met a really cute and kind girl my age in my town. We've gotten along well, and bit by bit, I became more and more attracted to her. Big problem was that she had a car, and 5 or 6 months after I've met her, she died in a car accident. The thing is, when we were together, we were speaking about a spiritual subject. It was always me that brought this type of conversation, and she said to me multiple times that she does not believe in life after death. I spoke to her about chakras and all that stuff, but 2 months after she died, I was in my living room trying to get some rest in front of my TV when I began to feel something I've never experienced in my spine, like a vibration of some sort, and I was feeling a presence in the room, definitely a female presence. I began to panic like hell for like 30 or 40 minutes, trying to convince myself that it was just me freaking out for nothing. I tried to get back on the couch. It was at night on only the TV with the lighting of the room. And then bam! There was that female presence, but now in human form. In the corner of the TV, she had appeared in a second. I was so scared, thinking she was a demon or else, I wasn't able to move at all. And she came closer to me. When she was just above me, she placed her right hand on my solar plexus and she smiled. The most beautiful smile I've ever seen on a woman. That's when I freaked out big time and ran to see my mother in another room. But it was a few moments later that I realised it was Jessie, my female friend who had died in a car accident. When she smiled at me, she was really beautiful. A good, nice and kind woman had died, but she seemed happy now at least. My question is, what do you think about her hand placed on my solar plexus? Was it a way for her to say to me that I was right, that there is a life after death? Or was it because I need to clean my chakras or else? I'm a good person, but I had been violent in my life and injured people many times in fights. So maybe it counts. I'm peaceful, but when angry, have no restraints in fight and can't control. I feel like there's a demon in me or following me, but that's another story. I still don't know what she was telling me. Sometimes I think about it still. A few weeks back, my girlfriend and I were driving back late at night from the carnival. The particular road we took was empty, as it usually is in that part of the country. There's no lights at the side of the said road, and it was foggy. While we were driving, a sudden single light pops up behind the car, maybe about a kilometre away, moving closer at a very fast pace. I said to my girlfriend, that motorcyclist is very brave, he's moving so fast. She looks around and says, yeah, he is. That's about 500 metres, maybe closer. He suddenly steers off to the right, which was odd because there was no exit, just straight road with forest and a ditch on both sides. Thinking he had an accident, we stopped and drove to where the light disappeared. The grass seemed as if someone actually did go through there, but no one was to be found. Being in an abandoned part of the country, we didn't feel like we should be going into the forest because we could seriously get lost in the dark. And besides, if someone did have an accident, they'd probably be in the ditch or the grass behind the ditch. We just shrugged it off and went on our way. Not even a minute later, the light appeared again, this time entering from the left and moving even faster. When the light was very close, I couldn't see it in the mirror anymore, like it should be in the dead angle. I looked to my left where it should have been. Nothing. My girlfriend was seriously freaking out and said not to stop, no matter what. We didn't encounter any more strange lights that day. I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I was playing near a wooded area. Not deserted or anything, there were homes nearby. In one of those homes lived a woman, not old nor ugly. Actually, a pretty attractive, roughly 20-year-old woman. She was called the Cold Woman by the neighbourhood kids, in Dutch. She was an odd one. She was always alone, never had any friends or family over, and never seemed to go anywhere. And she never seemed to leave her home at all, except for 3 moments when there was a bunch of kids playing in this forest near her house. She'd come out and walk over to the edge of the forest and just stand there and stare at us. After about 20 minutes, leave and go straight home. Another moment when she leaves was early in the morning, and we could see her there when going to school. Once again, she'd just be standing there and doing nothing. As far as we know, we just cycled past her, so there isn't much time to monitor her. She'd been facing into the forest, so she wasn't watching us or anything. During our vacations, we'd play out late, and we once saw her walking. We decided to follow her, and she'd go into the woods and stand facing this one particular tree. Said nothing, and went on her way after a while. We noticed she did this like 3 or 4 times a week. She'd also never seemed to have lights on, watch television, or was ever observed preparing food, or ordering any for that matter. A few years after this, she kept doing this. We grew older, and instead of playing, we just hung around. Some of the younger kids heard the stories as well, and poured glue all over the tree that she was apparently attached to. She either moved or vanished, for we haven't seen her after that. All of these events were pretty memorable, but what stood out most was her eyes. The brightest, bluest eyes you can imagine. But they weren't normal. Have you ever seen the eyes of a dead person? It's like they lack that glossy, alive feeling, a spark. When you look into the eyes of most people, they seem to look back at you. When she looked at you, it was as if she was looking through you, as if you were hollow. I can't really explain it, but to this day, I have a slight dislike for people with blue eyes. For I have a fear seeing those eyes again. Don't get me wrong, I never felt safe or threatened by her. She was just there and we accepted it. But it was as if she was not entirely human. They say the eyes are a window to the soul. Perhaps there's more truth in that than we realise. It was back around 2012-13. I live in Arkansas, and I'm from a small town of about 200 people. I was driving my friend home at night, who was asleep in the passenger seat. Out in front of me on the horizon, I couldn't tell if it was a mile away or a little less, or a little more, but it wasn't close. One by one, these teardrop-shaped segments of yellow-orange light appeared like they were being burned into the sky in a circular pattern, until they formed a kind of segmented spiral. They weren't touching, and it was as if they were looking at a 2D image. It was perfectly still. It didn't rotate, even though it looked like it would be rotating clockwise if it did. It remained lit up for maybe 5 seconds, and then the whole thing vanished. This thing was huge. Like if you held a quarter to your windshield, that's how big it was. I instinctively said, "Bro, did you see that?" to my sleeping friend. This happened like 1 minute away from his house, and he was too tired to really care when I dropped him off. I was determined to figure out what it was. I spent hours looking in flare patterns and lanterns online, and still couldn't even find anything remotely similar. It happened over pastures and road, no businesses or anything like that. Has anyone seen or heard of anything like this at all? I went to college for social service work. My placement ended up being in the memory unit, i.e. the dementia wing, of a retirement home where I live. The building itself was over 100 years old and made of solid limestone. It started off as a preschool and primary school in the late 1800s and moved on to become an orphanage up until sometime in the 1980s when it became the retirement home it is today. I specifically remember being told by the first resident I met that I looked like one of the children that are always running around, but I never saw a child myself in the building, unless it was family visiting their relatives. It wasn't until I met a certain resident that I started looking more closely for signs of the paranormal. She would call me into her room almost every morning because her clock had stopped ticking. I'd noticed it was always stopped at 3:33 a.m. every day like clockwork. Bad pun, I know. She would call me in to reset her clock. I started getting requests from other residents to reset their watches and clocks, all of which were stopped at 3:33 a.m. I started taking pictures every time I saw a stopped clock. I wish that I took better care of cell phones, as I don't have the phone where the pictures were taken anymore. However, there was one lady that always wore a watch on one arm and two on the other. One day, all were stopped at 3:33 a.m. Residents would call either myself or the PSWs in to get the Black Eyes children out of their rooms as well, so I was convinced the place was haunted. Is the number 333 significant in any other way than being half of 666? Which isn't possible on a clock. When I was a boy, sometime in the early to mid-90s, I had the most terrifying yet poignant experience. First, before I get onto the experience itself, I need to supply some much needed context. You see, I grew up on an acreage outside of a small mountain town in Alberta, Canada. In order to get to school, we had to catch the Lakes bus, on account of the fact that we lived near a series of summit lakes near the border to British Columbia. Due to the length of the bus ride, we had to catch the bus a lot earlier than the kids in town, which meant for most of the year, our ride happened before the sun had yet to rise, especially in the winter, which is when this took place. It was an odd but beautiful thing to head to school while the stars still shone brightly. Anyway, it was one of those early morning school days that I woke from a dream. Well, I say dream, but it was only God knows. Regardless, even now, I remember it as vividly as the day it happened, well over 2 decades ago. There was no narrative. I just simply found myself standing on the side of the highway by a twisted up guardrail. I could see the frozen lake beyond and where the rail used to be. There was a gaping hole in the ice, and then suddenly, standing right in front of me was an old woman, soaked from head to toe. She was staring at me, pale and shaking, where she then slowly raised her hand and pointed her finger at me. After this, she whispered in an icy voice as if it were directly in my ear, "It is so cold in here." And then I woke up. Sure, it was spooky as hell, but I thought it was just a strange nightmare, and so I got ready for school and got onto the bus. After about 10 minutes of driving through the silent darkness, I saw the lights painting the snowy pine trees in swathes of red and blue as we approached the shoreline of the lake. It was some sort of accident. As we slowly drove by, I saw them hauling a car out from the water through a hole in the ice. I would find out later that an older couple had lost control of their car and plunged through the ice where they drowned. To this day, when I pass that part of the lake, I can see her in my dream, staring at me from exactly where she died, the exact place. And I still shiver at the thought of the cold, dark water swallowing her up. A few years back, before I remodeled my room, I was up late playing video games and I had this encounter. I was sitting at my computer, it was late, like 11 or 12, and besides my computer screen there was my lava lamp providing extremely dim light. I was playing Bioshock Infinite on Steam and was consumed with it when I had, an impulse of some kind that made me turn my head to the left and look at my bedroom door. I looked and there was nothing, so I kept playing and maybe 30 minutes later I had it again. Now, to be fair, I don't actually remember if this happened over multiple nights or not. I really don't know, but what I do know is that those impulses to turn and look at my door stopped because on the night I was playing Bioshock, and by my second or so head turn, I didn't instantly turn back to my game. Instead, for some reason, I lingered a half second longer than normal and suddenly I saw this almost shadowy after image appear without any noise. It was like staring at a light bulb and then looking away, but in a weird way more detailed. Anyway, my door opens without a sound, and this hand comes around the corner, followed shortly thereafter by a head, and not a human one either. It was some sort of black, human-like creature. It was obviously larger than any other person I'd lived with at the time. Judging by what I saw of it, it should have been about 6, maybe 6.5 feet tall, and a head shaped like a shield. See link below. It had big alien-like black eyes that were at an angle, like offensively cartoonish Asian eyes, but open wide instead of slits. The eyes had really soft glowing points of light that went all the way around them. Its hands seemed to be 5-fingered, and the fingers were really long and pointy. It just opened my door without a sound, and we stared at each other for a few seconds. Then, like I was in a trance, I just started to turn away and start playing my game again. At the same time, I started to look away, it pulled back and closed my door, once again without any noise. I had never seen anything so blunt before, and haven't seen anything since, but now, it was really weird. The strangest part is that I had no emotional or mental reaction to it whatsoever. I saw it, and I knew it wasn't human, and that it was unnatural, but I had no actual thoughts about it or emotional reactions to it. It's like I knew what I was seeing, but my mind wasn't convinced. Anyone have anything like that happen to them? As a kid, we weren't poor exactly. We just made it most of the time. To supplement my father's income, my mother cleaned houses. She cleaned for this one family for a really long time, but eventually the work dried up and she moved on. I can still remember her cleaning houses though. I would go along, especially to this house she cleaned a lot. The kids that lived there, namely the son, always had the best and newest toys and video games. Since the kids were at school, I got to play with their stuff. Now, nothing weird happened while she cleaned, but after she quit. See, I have this memory of my mom cleaning the upstairs hall at the entrance of the stairwell. It's not as vivid as it once was, but it's still fairly clear. Well, one night a few years after she quit, I'm in bed and I started thinking of this memory. Started pulling little details out of the fog and really putting it all together. It was amazing. I was wide awake but with my eyes closed, and it was like I was back there and my mom was really cleaning. I played around in it for a second, listened to snippets of the half-remembered question I had asked my mom. Then I got the urge to really relive the glory days, so I walked off and entered the son's room. It was all there, just like I remembered. A model car on his dresser, the dingy fish tank against the inside wall, and the army of Star Wars Legos on the far wall. It was awesome, but there was also an emptiness to it. It was, after all, a memory, and nothing there was real, right? Right? Wrong. I went to look at the Legos since they had been my favourites at the time. I was bent over looking at them when I heard a sound, not part of the memory, but something new. It's hard to describe what it sounded like, and after actual years of attempts, I finally managed to make a similar sound myself. It sounded like if you restrict your throat intentionally and extend your mouth while sucking air in sharply. The result is something similar to what I heard, a sort of unnatural inhaled growl. Needless to say, it got my attention, and so I turned to my right to see what on earth had made it. Under the boy's bed was supposed to be all open and well lit. That's how I remembered it. Sunny, dusty, and well lit. It wasn't. Instead, it was completely black, and out of the unnatural square of darkness, something was looking at me. It was big, judging from its face and hands, which were the only parts of its body that were visible. It had to be at least the size of an adult male. Its fingers were long and pointy like spikes dug into the carpet. Its skin looked rough, possibly scaled. It was uniformly black all over, and its face was relatively flat. There was no visible mouth, nose, nostril, or ear holes of any kind. It had the biggest eyes, at least 3 times the size of a person, and they were perfect circles. I do mean exact perfect circles, no lids of any kind. These eyes themselves were like a person's, except that instead of white with a coloured ring, they were just a gradual colour shit. Starting with a light gold and moving to a violet purple at the clearly defined ring. The colours were shimmery like paint flecks in water. It was beautiful. I felt no fear staring into its eyes, and so curiosity drove me to get closer. I stood up and walked to the bed where I got down on hands and knees. I brought my face down to the carpet so that it was level with the thing's face. I spent a good 3 seconds staring into its eyes in amazement. And it was like all the reactions and emotions I should have had already came rushing to me. I felt an overwhelming sense of panic and fear. I set a record for being able to throw yourself backward and kick away across the carpet. This thing didn't move, not once, just sat there, completely immobile. It never so much as changed the direction of its eyes, though I felt like they could see me at every angle. I opened my eyes in my bed. It was over. The memory had collapsed. I hadn't been sleeping. I was still wide awake and drifted off shortly after with an uneventful sleep. I have no idea what it was or why it was there. My only thought is I hope it isn't the paranormal equivalent of a cobweb. Until recently, I worked at an unassisted living establishment in the deep south. We had a mostly female serving staff. I was only one of 3 male servers of about 13 people. My manager and I were close, and she suggested I ask about this newish girl, Valerie. She was blonde, hyper, and needy. Not my type. Needed everyone to like her, and it bothered her that I didn't and was always a little cold toward her. She gave me a funny feeling, uncomfortable just a little. I passed it off as my anxiety around women and paid no mind to her antics. Finally, one night we're all cleaning up and cycling in and out of the kitchen. Everyone's happy and Valerie is her old self. She's busy yelling excitedly to one of the other servers and all eyes are on her. There's at least 4 other people in the kitchen besides me, and at least 3 are staring at her. I have work to do, so I turn to leave, and as my eyes are panning away, Valerie changes. In her place is some kind of creature, perfectly silent and dressed in her clothes. It's a pale off-white and its skin is smooth and geometrically cut with noticeably sharp features, like it was an unfinished model. It has no mouth, a long snout-like extension that goes down its face, like a horse that ran into a wall. It has the biggest, lidless eyes, and these weird ear-like extensions on either side of its head that just go up and tilt back slightly. It's just staring at the other servers. It's like this endless second of time. I walk out the kitchen and spend the rest of that shift and the rest of my time working at the facility avoiding her more than usual. I kept thinking, does she know what I know? When I was a kid, I had a Woody and Buzz. My Buzz was the weird one with the choking hazard arm cannon. He also had this little light bulb in his stomach that didn't light up. I can only assume it was part of an infrared gimmick. Sometimes, my Buzz would just talk on its own. It only did this while in the closet, and on some occasions, you could hear Woody talk back. It was always scripted lines from the movie. The problem is that they weren't a matching set. My Woody was far too big for my Buzz, and just like the movie, he could only had a pull cord. They would still talk though. Buzz would start and Woody would finish. Eventually their batteries died, thank God, and I outgrew them. Then I got G.I. Joe Duke, with the silicone head and moving mouth, who also had a talking function. Now he never talked without me pushing the button, but once when I picked him up, I saw his mouth move. It wasn't super obvious, but I was hyper attentive to detail, and I know my hand wasn't half cocking the mechanism, hooked to the button. His lips just moved like he had his mouth open a bit. Then he'd closed it when I looked over. I conducted rigorous tests on his mechanism to see if it had gotten stuck, but just wasn't possible. I was also very careful with my G.I. Joes and treated them very lovingly, as I did all my toys. There was no chance of damage from rough play. Toys would end up all over my room like any other kind, even under the bed. I would on very, very, very rare occasions hear crunching sounds as though someone was dragging itself through the junk under my bed. With the various childhood drawings and over the random items, even hooking into the carpet, I could hear the fibers pop and snap quietly. I've always had an irrational fear of anything inanimate that had eyes, from magazines in the bathroom to small porcelain figures that stayed around the house. I always felt I was being watched, and it wasn't at all uncommon to find every figure turned toward a wall, and every magazine with a face upside down or covered after I'd been in a room. Even my Joes had to be put up so as not to see me while I slept. I was deathly afraid of being alone or left in the dark as a child. I'm still uncomfortable with certain rooms in my house, and I have routinely weird dreams of a strange black creature following me wherever I go. I've moved out as I now serve in the military, and my disease has followed me, as have the dreams. It's been the same for years now. I always feel something big, black and scary is lurking just behind me, around a corner, in the shadows, or in the closet. I can't function, but it's only through sheer force of will. I'm starting to wonder if it wasn't also connected to my toys. I live on an army base, I'm not going to say which one, near an old nuclear transport depot. I like to go running through the woods by the depot because it's nice gravel and pavement hybrid road with little hills, great exercise. I had finished my run on Thursday and was walking back to my car. As I was coming down a small hill, I saw one of those spindly bushes that are damn near impossible to break off, really flexible like young lilac. Well, the bush just sort of bends over like someone grabbed the stem and just bent it over and straightened it back up. I got the distinct impression that something was there, so being the witch that I am, I stepped off the road into the grass and greeted whoever or whatever was there as a friend. It's worth saying that this isn't my first time with weird shit out here. Running at night is extremely hard because of this feeling being watched. I once tried to run while it was snowing at night and got such an overpowering sense of danger that I stopped short after a quarter mile and ran back to my car. If I walk the woods, I'm always respectful and ask permission to enter, as you will immediately get the feeling that you are not alone. When I walk the tracks, that parallel, a short ways off there, is an obviously strange feeling that emanates from the left and right wood lines. The other day, I went in walking and kept asking permission to go deeper, but at a certain point, it was like a wall was in front of me. I couldn't go on. I got the impression I should leave and not stop or turn around. At first, I didn't feel anything unusual as I was walking out, just mild annoyance at having to cut my walk short. As I kept going back, however, I got a stronger and more desperate feeling of being followed. It made me feel like sprinting to safety. As soon as I cleared the woods and got on tracks, it faded. Home on vacation visiting my dad. My childhood home has always been creepy at certain times. When you're home alone at any time or when the sun goes down and you're the last one up, that's when it gets weird. Our house is old, early 80s I think, but not that old. We're only the second family to ever live there, and as far as I know, no one has died there. Ever since I was a kid, the house has been creepy. The yard space too. As a kid, I always had this feeling of being watched to the point I stopped going outside. The problem is that when home alone or up late at night by yourself, you start to feel like you're being watched inside too. No one else in my family has had this problem, though my sister has seen a number of things inside, and everyone has seen something outside, including an old family friend. So every time I come home, I'm up late, and my dad's in bed asleep. I'm playing video games or watching Hulu, and sooner or later this creeping feeling of eyes on me on the stairs starts to bug the hell out of me. Occasionally, I'll see something out of the corner of my eye. Whenever I put my headphones, though, that's when it gets unbearable. The moment you have one earbud in, it increases dramatically. Last night, I had one in and was watching TV, and I saw something out of my peripheral vision. Pulled the bud out and looked around and then put it back in. I sat there and waited. Sure enough, not 5 minutes later, a figure leans out of my room and looks at me. That's how it always is. A white figure peeks around the corner of my door and looks into the living room. The feeling of being watched is so intense that before I ever moved, I rearranged the furniture so that I could always see the hall while on the couch. Over the years, I have heard clapping while home alone, heard singing while home alone, heard music when none was being played, heard scratching at the front door at night, heard scratching on my window screen at night, felt something in my bed twice, heard a sort of muted voice. I've had strange nightmares about creatures. I've seen a black creature open my door at night. I've seen a white creature all over the house too many times to count. I've heard shuffling in the basement at night while alone and the cat was upstairs. I've seen something between the fridge and the wall. And I felt a presence all over the house, mostly by the hallway. I've seen something outside multiple times at night. I've had my phone act up outside at night after feeling like I was being followed. Had the house get darker while the lights were bright as ever. And that's just what I can remember. And I've always hated this one tree across the road from my window. It's like it has a presence after dark that has always bugged me. As I said, others in and out of my family have seen things, so I know I'm not crazy. To add to my credibility, I've also seen a therapist and been given a clean bill of mental health. Last night I was feeling weird, like the world was a soundstage and I was an actor. It happens occasionally and I like to take notes. I was feeling the sense of something greater about to happen. I was talking to my patron a little before bed, watched a little TV, the usual. I'd been on the edge of something the past few days, and watching the first episode low-key just pushed into overdrive. I should stop here and say that I'm sane. I had a strict therapist that had to clear me for work. I was a big whole thing. So I go to bed. I'm not asleep though. I'm doing this thing where I quiet my mind and listen to whatever comes. I hear a woman's voice say something about holding the world, I think. Then I'm just gone. I'm moving forward and I peek around a corner of what appears to be a movie theatre. There's these strange creatures standing in human clothing at the ticket counter. They have popcorn. They're covered in a golden brown fur, medium in length, and they have big disturbing black eyes, like a cat that's prepared to pounce. They have short cat-like ears, and I can see that their mouths are hidden behind a layer of fur like a shaggy dog. Their faces are extended and similar to a cat. Almost as soon as I peek, one of them sees me. It's like a twitch, super fast, and his eyes are on me. Terrifying feeling like you're a deer in headlights. Then my vision goes black like a screen being switched off. White letters, all on caps, appear in the center of my vision. File data. I actually jumped in bed and panicked for a second. I was still awake, but I had this terrible feeling like it wasn't over. I almost wanted to get up and turn on a light. I slept pretty good, and today, I just felt burned out and foggy. This isn't my first rodeo by any means. In fact, I just had missing time while writing this, but I just felt overwhelming panic when our eyes met. Like, shit just got real way too fast. Like I just peeked outside the soundstage. I've seen things in human clothes before, at an old job and once in a video. It never sits well.